right, hello and welcome everyone back to another Peaceful Solution Character Education Program certification training course where we are training teachers to go on and to teach this program. Now, it's been a few weeks since we've been with you, so we're going to do a quick review to bring us back to this book that we're in, The Moral Excellence in the Workplace, just to refresh our minds of the goal of this unit from the Peaceful Solution and everything that, you know, the main points that stuck out from each chapter to pick up where we're going to start tonight. So for our start of the review, we're going to go to the introduction, which is on page I. So if you have your book with you, we're going to be on page I. Okay, so page I under the introduction, and I'm going to be reading from the first column on the bottom left side. It says, in this program, The Moral Excellence in the Workplace, the focus is on character education as an important aspect of on-the-job training. It is not uncommon that before an employee is officially hired, he or she must undergo orientation and training. But with so many people being terminated for stealing, insubordination, or sexually inappropriate behavior, traditional orientation and training are no longer adequate. And that's where the Peaceful Solution, Moral Excellence in the Workplace comes in handy. Okay, it says training, at the bottom of the same paragraph, it says training in moral character as presented through the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program's Moral Excellence in the Workplace encompasses not only behaviors, but their attitudes and communication skills as well. It promotes teamwork, respect for authority, responsibility, and self-control. With behaviors such as theft, harassment, tardiness, absenteeism, conflict, and aggression on the rise, we cannot delay putting this program in place to help decrease, if not to eliminate, these problematic issues. Okay, so that's the goal of this book here. Okay, we want to help in the workplace to eliminate these types of problems. Right, so for chapter one was workers with positive character wanted. And I'm going to go to page 11. Okay, and I'm just going to be highlighting main points throughout the chapters. So page 11, under the importance of moral values to character. Okay, at the top of the first paragraph, it says moral values clearly separate what is right from wrong, and they are the foundation of character because they govern the way that people think and behave. In general, moral principles are considered universal because people from all over the world agree with and uphold them. And remember, the Peaceful Solution is a thought-provoking program. It gets you to thinking, why am I thinking this? Why am I feeling this way? Why am I acting this way? Why am I treating somebody this way? Why am I treating my supervisor this way? It's constantly getting us to think, and that comes to that moral principles and that universal code of conduct, that everybody wants to be treated with respect. Everyone wants to know that someone cares. That's a universal code and a universal emotion. At the bottom of page 11, it says moral values set boundaries, and if you do not have that highlighted, highlight that in your book, okay? Moral values set boundaries that help an individual demonstrate appropriate behavior towards self and others. And that's what that moral values is, that standard, that boundary. I will not go outside of this. If it doesn't fit inside of my boundaries, it doesn't fit inside the belief system that I have for myself, I will not react this way to someone, I will not behave this way to someone, and I will not put myself in a situation to risk my boundaries. Right? It says our character is a combination of the moral values that we have been taught, as well as values that include work ethics, education, hobbies, and so on. In addition to values, your interactions with others and their influences have helped to mold and shape your character, making you into the person or the adult that you are today. Okay, so remember the influences. With our moral values, we're also influenced by those that we surround ourselves with. So we're going to flip over to page 14. Okay, so the top of page 14, it says, when you possess these traits, and if you'll flip back over to page 12, pages 12 and 13 gives us a whole list of positive character traits. Okay, so this is what it's talking about, the positive traits of being educated, respectful, patient. Okay, so flip back over to page 14. It says, when you possess these traits, so all of those positive traits, when you possess them, you can feel positive about yourself and your ability to interact with others in a meaningful and caring way. And it goes back to that evaluation course there. Okay, it says, in like manner, when people around you exhibit these same positive character traits and treat you accordingly, you feel appreciated and you feel respected. And that is the goal of the peaceful solution. When we're practicing it, when we're constantly aware of our thoughts, we're aware of our actions, you and those around you feel appreciated. They feel that someone cares, and that encourages them to treat you and continue to treat you with respect. It says, in essence, this is what the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program teaches. By simply interacting and communicating using these positive character traits, we can avoid hurting and devaluing each other. And that goes back to having that respect, watching what we say, watching what we think, always being aware of it so that we don't put ourselves in a position where we do cause someone to either, take on their insecurities and turn them into an action, or we cause someone to feel insecure or devalue themselves. All right, so we're going to go on to page 21. We're still in chapter 1 here. Page 21, under Looking Beyond Personality. It says, although personality is important in how we get along with others, it does not indicate the measure of a person's true character. Character, on the other hand, is what helps you to determine what is right and wrong. Character defines the way you treat yourself and the way that you treat others. It dictates your moral and your ethical beliefs, and that is a big difference that the Peaceful Solution really stresses, is the importance of knowing the difference in your personality versus your character. You can be friends with someone, and we'll get on into later on in this book, but you can be friends with someone off their personality, and you can destroy a friendship based on your character once you get to know the true course of the true source of what that person's belief is. It says it is not as easy to recognize a person's character as it is to recognize their personality. You have to get to know someone. And I remember years ago people saying that if you're in a relationship or a friendship with someone, you have to know them for 5 to 7 years before you really know that person. You could be friends with somebody and then one day they do something and it's like, well, I didn't know that's how you thought. I didn't know that's how you felt, because that situation hadn't presented itself for them to be challenged or for them to have to test what their beliefs were on that specific situation. Okay, it says sometimes a positive character can be hidden behind negative personality traits. And I want you to pay attention or underline this next sentence because I find it so important. It says, so the sloppy or the boring worker, so this is their personality, somebody who's sloppy, somebody who's boring, they might be very honest and they might be compassionate. So sometimes when we're in, being the workplace manual, when we are working side by side with someone, sometimes we can brush them off because they're boring or because they're sloppy or because they just can't seem to understand our vibe. But they're honest, they're compassionate. That's something we can work with. We can overlook that personality, or we can help them be organized, or we can help them be neat. But getting somebody who is not compassionate to learn empathy is a bigger challenge than getting somebody to not be sloppy and to be organized. Okay, the bottom of page 21 says the qualities that determine character are based upon the choices that we make. And if it's based on our choices, remember our character is defined. That means it's something that we can control. No one can label us as being this. It's something that our own choices define this as being us. Okay, so going into chapter 2, self-control, the essential ingredient to a successful workplace. And on page 29, we're just going to read from the bottom. Page 29, it says self-control is a foundational character trait that enables the individual to manage anger and act in ways that promote respect, positive interaction, and compassion even when they are upset. Self-control is necessary for all positive relationships and for the success of any work environment. Okay, so self-control lays that foundation for every other positive trait to be built upon. So we're going to flip over to page 35. And if you've been following the Peaceful Solution from the beginning, or you're just recently tuning in, you've probably heard of the STOP acronym, okay? And that's what this is here. On page 34, it gives us the STOP acronym, which is to stop, think, options, and proceed. And then on page 35, it has under change negative thoughts to positive ones. I'm going to have you highlight a few things if you don't already have them highlighted in your book, just because they really stick out when teaching this section. Okay, it says to use the STOP acronym, you must first, okay, so put a 1 by this sentence. First, determine if the thoughts you're experiencing because of your anger triggers are negative. So if you're using the STOP acronym, that's the first thing you're going to do. Okay, skip the next sentence where it says the first thing to do is stop. You're going to put a number 2. That's the second thing you're going to do. The first thing to do is to stop. So this is the first thing after you've determined it's negative, okay? Stop your thoughts from going any further. It says the truth is, saying that we are going to overcome a problem is part of the strategy of winning. Okay, where it says once, you're going to put number 3. Once we have purposed in our minds that we are going to change, the next step is to practice changing our thoughts. Okay, and it goes back to our thoughts. For the STOP acronym to have its full effect, you have to be aware of your thoughts. Right, so we're going to flip over to page 40. And I just want to pick this one example from this page because when we went through it in previous classes, it really stuck out to me as something we're going to need going into chapter 4, which is where we'll start today. Okay, so the third paragraph on page 40, it says positive options, on the other hand, are respectful, responsible, and harmless. They promote peace, communication, and cooperativeness. By practicing self-control, you can solve every problem peacefully with wisdom and respect for yourself and others by always making right choices. Then it gives us an example here, okay? It says, for example, Christina thinks that her supervisor ignores her suggestions, but always accepts the suggestions of her coworker. Rather than let her thoughts get out of control, she decided to talk over the problem with her supervisor. Christina voiced her concerns with respect for him as the one in authority and for her coworker. Okay, now really key in on the reason her supervisor did not listen when Christina kept bringing problems. It says Christina's supervisor informed her that her coworker offered suggestions that were solutions to the problem. Christina realized that oftentimes she focused on the problem rather than the solution. And it's so important because after reading this and going through this in class, I started being aware of the disagreements or the confrontations that I have with my supervisor or with people in authority. And I started thinking, when I felt like I wasn't being heard, was I really not being heard, or was I just bringing them more problems? Was I offering a solution to it, or was I just complaining and whining about the people that I worked with? Was I just telling you my view of what they did, or was I offering a solution to the situation? So it's something to really keep in mind as we go into chapter 4 on asking, being aware when we're asking, why are we asking, how, we'll get into that. Okay, so we're going to go on to the next review here on page 44. Okay, so page 44 in the third paragraph. It says, our work environments consist of at least several people with different characters, personalities, and customs working together to accomplish a goal. Okay, and when you're in a work area or a workplace, you're a team accomplishing the same goal. And if one member isn't fitting into that team, you can't accomplish your goal. You might accomplish what could take 6 hours, might take 3 days. It takes a little longer. The goal's still going to get accomplished, but it takes longer than it should. It says you can stop and think of the best way to handle the situation to arrive at a peaceful solution while maintaining, and really key on this, maintaining your self-respect and positive moral character. Because a lot of the times we can feel that if our voices aren't being heard, let's be honest, we live in a generation of independent women. And we live in a world where everyone is independent. And if I lean down to accept correction from you, then I'm not standing up for myself. Okay, I'm losing my self-respect. I'm not quite as woman as I was 10 minutes ago because you beat me down. Okay, that's not what it means to be humble, and that's not what it means to accept correction and the guide from others. When we accept that, you can become more woman because now you have the knowledge and you have the ability to help someone else go through that same thing, or to help them not have to maybe get into the rut that you were getting because it took us a little bit longer to understand a situation. Okay, so we're going to go into chapter 3, which is where we left off a few weeks ago. Chapter 3 is mine, yours, and theirs, ownership in the workplace. So page 51 in the second paragraph, it says, it is important that all employees recognize the moral concept of ownership in the workplace by respecting their possessions of the company and that of their coworkers. And the last sentence at the bottom of the page says, moral behavior in regards to ownership is one way to build confidence and trust in the workplace. Okay, so having respect for ownership is one way to build that trust and respect in your workplace. Okay, so we're going to go to page 54. Okay, page 54 in the top of the page where it says accepting another's decision. Not being able to accept someone's decision about their belongings is also a violation of the rights of ownership and usually results in conflicts and hurt feelings. Okay, so that's another reason why we're saying that ownership is important, recognizing the rights of ownership, because a lot of conflicts that we run into in a workplace comes from the lack of respect of the rights of ownership. Okay, and to conclude our review here, we're going to go to page 57. The bottom paragraph on page 57, it says, keep in mind that character is based on morality. And remember, morality is that line that divides right from wrong behavior. Okay, it's that boundary line that we set for ourselves based on our beliefs. Moral principles are what separate a positive character from a negative one. Okay, and that's why we're constantly evaluating ourselves. Okay, which side of the moral principles do we fall on? Having moral principles like self-control will ensure that you make positive decisions, which shows respect to others, their possessions, and their rights of ownership. Okay, so that brings us up to our starting point tonight, which is on page 59. Okay, so we're going to start on chapter 4, page 59, ask, more than just a 3-letter word. Okay, and before we get into this, I did a little research in talking to people and going online to see what other people are saying across the globe. And I asked, why is it important to ask in the workplace? Okay, so really think about that. Why is it important to ask in the workplace? The Peaceful Solution has an entire chapter dedicated to a 3-letter word called ask. Why is it important? Okay, so they gave 5 answers here. 1, it clarifies your role, especially if you're new to the job or you're getting a new position. If you can ask the questions and you're constantly asking, then you get clarification of what your job is to make sure you're meeting your credentials. Right? Another one, it exhibits desirable leadership qualities. Okay, so asking to make sure you got clarification is actually a leadership quality that is respected in our workplace. All right, it also shows your willingness to learn than just you get the job, you think you know how everything's going to go, and you don't ask questions. So it shows that willingness to learn when you can ask. Okay, it also shows that you're receptive to new information and you're willing to change your prior beliefs. Okay, and it also shows that you are open-minded to ideas, and it's also a valuable characteristic when being hired. Okay, another one is, what is the value? Okay, so that's why it's important. But what is the value of asking in the workplace? Why is this so valuable? It says it helps you to uncover the challenges that you will face. So if you have that mentality where you can ask, you can avoid getting into the problem because you learn from those around you without having to experience it. It helps to generate better solutions to solve a problem. If you ask, if you have foresight and you can see, okay, if I'm doing what she's saying, I can see how this might create a problem with me and this person, or with me, because I know that that's just not me. Okay, if you're doing something, for example, where I work, I do cutting and sewing. Okay, I'm a seamstress. And if I can't cut straight without having a line, then I should tell them that I need a line marked before I start cutting, and it's not really straight. Okay, because when I started off, I could not cut straight without it. Now I can pretty eyeball it and gotten a little better. But if you can't do that, that's something you need to tell them up front and ask them, is there someone who can assist me with this, or is it possible that I can do this? It might take 5 extra minutes, but at least I'm not shorting someone on the fabric that they ordered because I can't do what you're asking me to do. It's not within my capabilities. Right? Another one is when we try to do everything on our own with only the knowledge that we have, not being open-minded, it limits your abilities and it makes you counterproductive. Okay, it limits your abilities and it makes you counterproductive. Okay, so I ask another question because I find this a lot. Okay, so when you're young and you're going into the workplace, and also as you get older, you find a lot of people are afraid to ask. They don't ask questions because they're simply afraid. And why would somebody be afraid? One is they have the fear of being perceived as being a needy or whiny person when somebody's constantly asking. They have a fear of being seen as constantly being needy or whiny or annoying. Another one is that they will be shunned or rejected if you ask for help. So sometimes you can feel stupid if somebody, looks down their glasses at you or like huffs, like you're asking me this again, like how can you not catch it now? They kind of get that feeling. Some people, and this is an important point, it says that some people make excuses continuously as to why they didn't ask Why, I didn't ask because, I didn't ask because. And it's simply, they said most common, they really wanted to ask. They just weren't sure how to put it into words. So those are just some things to keep in mind as we go into this chapter, why somebody might be afraid. Okay, they might feel annoyed, they might feel needy, but they also might just not know how to put it into words. So that's something to also take into consideration. All right, so going on to page 59, it says ask, more than just a 3-letter word. It's the overview, and it says, in this lesson, the concept of asking is taught as one of the means of developing a positive moral character. And who remembers where we really, if you've been with us from the beginning of the certification course, where we really went into asking? Where's the first place it was introduced? There was a whole unit for this. Who remembers? All right, if you said the elementary series, then you are correct. So here on the overhead, we have an outline of our elementary series, which we made an acronym, which is ORASH. So it's ownership, respect, asking, self-control, and honesty. So unit number 3, and that's in our elementary series, which is kindergarten through grade 5, you have that there. So you see the importance of asking, and yes, it's in the kindergarten series, which it would be an amazing benefit if by the time you're teaching the workplace manual, if the adults that you encounter have been through the Peaceful Solution from the kindergarten series, but most likely that's not the case. So yes, we start teaching it in kindergarten, but that doesn't mean the person that you're teaching in this class has any knowledge of any other material of the Peaceful Solution. So keep that in mind. We do encourage parents to have their children enroll in these classes, but as an adult, you're starting here, okay? So take that into consideration. It says, why include asking as a part of moral character development? The answer might seem simple on the surface, but has profound implications. Although it can easily be overlooked as part of training in positive moral character, encouraging the habit of asking to meet our needs, to discover what others need, to secure our safety, and to receive instructions and clarification are important avenues by which self-control, respect, and responsibility are developed. And if you circle that word habit, and the 2 sentences above that, that word habit, you can reference that to the character unit, page 73. Okay, so the character unit, page 73 of the intermediate series, where we talked about the value, imitate, and practice. Okay, so practice is part of that habit. When you value something, you imitate it, you practice it, it becomes a part of who you are, and that's how it becomes a habit. Okay, you get into the habit of asking, you get into the habit of apologizing when you didn't understand something, you get into the habit of doing these things. And that's how you develop self-control, you develop respect, and you develop responsibility. Asking to touch, use, or borrow an item, and then abiding by the decision the owner makes shows self-control and respect. But that's only part of the benefits of asking. Learning to ask to fulfill our needs also denotes responsibility as well as honesty. Asking for instructions and clarification helps us to develop the important character trait of humility. Okay, and I have that highlighted, that last sentence in my book, asking for instructions and clarification, it helps us to develop the important character trait of humility. Okay, and remember, humility is not an argumentation regarding the instructions. So being humble and asking doesn't always mean you can ask and you can ask and you can ask and you can ask. At some point, you have to accept the answer that the supervisor, or accept the answer that the person in authority or the owner of the business or the corporation, at some point you have to accept the answer. So yes, you can be humble and you can ask, and that is developing that trait of humility. But we also have to remember the trait of respect and responsibility and acceptance. When the answer is given, this is the answer. I'm not going past that. And for that word argumentation, it means the action or process of reasoning systematically in support of an idea, an action, or a theory. Okay, so we're not wanting to get into an argument by constantly asking questions. At the bottom of page 59, it says, teaching employees the importance of asking can result in greater trust and respect between their coworkers. This will eliminate many conflicts and acts of dishonesty. When the concept of asking is encouraged in the workplace, a unified, peaceful environment can be achieved. And that is really our ultimate goal in teaching from the Workplace Manual and going through this course, is to make a peaceful environment to work, to make a place where you know your people are being honest with you, they're respectful to you, and it's a peaceful, enjoyable environment, and it's not somewhere you dread to go from one day to the next. It says a unified, peaceful environment needs to be encouraged in the workplace. Don't assume it will occur. You need to talk about it. And that's where, when we go in and we teach the Workplace Manual, a lot of supervisors are very open to it. And they recognize that their employees really do need the help, and they need the guidance, and they need, the overview, and to help them get on track. But supervisors and owners and, people over corporations, up the chain of command, can also benefit from this program. And that's where, you talk about it, you have to say, okay, what is the goal that I have? If my employees are not meeting the goal of my company, what can I do to get them there? Are they not seeing my vision, or do they not have vision? Because some people don't, if you don't know your own purpose in life, you don't have vision for where you work. So a lot of the times you have to recognize it's a personal level that comes into the workforce. They can't see a vision of how they can contribute to your company or your organization because they can't see a vision for their own lives. And if you don't have one, you can't have the other. So it's not the supervisor's job to give them, a personal help lesson, but it is something that has to be talked about as well. Because as, a supervisor, if you want the best out of your team, you have to give them the support and the mental stability that they need. All right, going on to page 61, we're going to get into the lesson of Chapter 4. It says, Chapter 4, Lesson Plan, Topic, Ask, more than just a 3-letter word. The purpose and objective, also known as the goal, so the goal of this chapter, is that students will learn about the importance of asking in the workplace. They will explore the consequences of not asking and the rewards of asking. And the materials you'll need here is a paper, pens, and your pencils. Okay, so that's the goal here, that students will learn about the importance of asking in a workplace. They will explore the consequences of not asking, and we're going to get into a lot of scenarios over the next few weeks so we can see hands-on how do you apply what we just reviewed, how do you apply the importance of asking, because we do teach it to children. But I came into a situation just a few weeks ago with someone, and there was a situation where there was an older child, they were an older teen, and they behaved in a certain way. And somebody responded, they disrespected their authority. And somebody responded and said, "You're not old enough to talk to them that way yet." And I had to think, at what point do you reach the age that it's acceptable to be disrespectful to your authority? Whether it be your teacher, whether it be your supervisor, whether it be the owner of the company. So be mindful of the influences or the thoughts that we might have, that until you hear it spoken like that, you don't really consider it. Because a child who disrespected their authority would have a timeout, or they would lose a privilege, or they would have to sit for a few minutes. Okay, when it becomes a teenager, there's also a consequence. When you become an employee as an adult, there's also a consequence. And it has to be something that we're aware of, because if we have that thought that you're not old enough, then at some point we've thought in our minds that I'm validated in my disrespect for someone. And that's something as the Peaceful Solution that we really want to change that mindset, that it's never an age-appropriate thing or a situational appropriate thing to disrespect anyone in authority or to disrespect any life in general. All right, so I thank you for your time, and I'm going to turn it over to our next teacher.
Welcome, everyone. Didn't Brittany do an excellent job reviewing our workplace manual? That was a really nice refresher for us and to get us into Chapter 4. And so tonight, she started out with giving us the introduction and the purpose for this lesson. And as we showed, this is taught all throughout the Peaceful Solution, from kindergarten on up, and even in preschool, actually. So, asking is a concept that we're taught as children. Most of us are taught, well, you have to ask, if you want something. And that's kind of where it's left, right? And as we grow up, we're just expected to know when we should ask and how we should ask and who we should ask. But, the workplace manual really shows us it is a very critical thing to practice asking in the workplace. It's not a childish thing. It's not immature. And you aren't how did Brittany put it? She said, you know, some people feel that they're being annoying, or, you know, they're being nagging if they're always asking. But really, an employer is going to value people who take the time to ask. Less mistakes are going to be made in the workplace. The workplace is going to be kept pretty safe. And, you know, the benefits that we're going to get into, there are so many benefits. You're going to keep hearing me use the word benefits in this chapter, because there's no end to the benefits when we practice asking. So she read our purpose statement, and, you know, if you highlight that purpose statement, that's what we're going to be focusing on for the chapter, the importance of asking in the workplace, and we're going to explore the consequences of not asking and the rewards of asking. So when we're experiencing the consequences from not asking, you know, as instructors to the employers, or the managers and supervisors and even the employees, you're going to be explaining to them negative choices are going to lead to negative outcomes. And all of that will keep you on a negative character. You know, you will have negative character as the result of that. But if you implement, you know, the positive character traits that are taught in this book, then you're going to want to make positive choices. And implementing asking is one of those things. So it's going to lead to better relationships in the workplace, and that positive character that you know, we're pushing for in teaching the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. So the materials here listed are paper and pens and pencils, because we encourage our students to take notes and, you know, to really get in their minds, you know, the things that hit them and strike them and stand out to them. You want them to write in their books, you know. That's something that I've always encouraged students, is make notes right in your book, because then you have them right there. And if there's something isn't quite explained in the book, well, then you have your explanation from your instructors. Okay? So the procedures, let's start in procedure number 1. And now this is a little review, which Brittany kind of covered, reviewing chapter 3, but every lesson will have a review of the last lesson. And if your students do well at that review, you know that you accomplished, you know, getting them to understand the purpose of the last lesson. So the reviews are not something to gloss over. They're very important to go through and make sure your students are ready to move forward. Because if they're not, it's time to go back to the last lesson and work on it some more, until they know these answers, or they can find them and they can, you know, give reasonable answers. So we're going to go over the questions, and I want to point out to you where they are in the last chapter so you can note them, okay? And it says, review the previous lesson by asking the following questions. And this is on page 61. That's where we are. And you could ask your students to close their books, or, you know, if it's been a while since the last lesson, like it has been for us, you could say open back up to the last chapter and look for the answers, you know, so that they could be finding them, all right? So the first question is, what are the rights of ownership? And that answer, I'm just going to show you here. I have them highlighted in my book. So if we can just put it up on the screen. See where it's highlighted there in the middle of the page? That's the rights of ownership. It says this means that you have authority to make decisions about what you own. You also have the right to enjoy what you own without fear that it could be stolen from you or destroyed. Okay, so that's the answer for the first question on page 61. Now back to page 61. That was page 51. Paragraph 1. So you can put that in your notes there. And then B, question B says, name some honest ways we can obtain our belongings. Okay, name some honest ways that we can obtain our belongings. And your students should find the answers for that on page 52. They're listed with big check marks next to them. Okay, so you can see that. And right there, you can buy the things you need and want. You can be given things in exchange for work done. You can receive them as gifts. You can inherit them, or you can trade for things. Okay, so that's how we obtain our belongings honestly. And that's on page 52. Those 5 points on page 52, you can mark that there in your review. Okay. Back to page 61, the third question, C, says, in what ways do people steal from the workplace? Okay, in what ways do they steal from the workplace? And a lot of people, they might just have a few common answers, but on page 55, if you turn back to page 55, we really cover it in paragraphs 2 through 5. I'm just going to show it to you and then I'll read them. So use of our workplace items, that's on page 55. And in paragraph 2, it says, restaurants across our nation routinely have food items stolen. Department stores have various items stolen right off the delivery trucks, and stacks of papers, markers, pencils, and other items are stolen from offices worldwide. And, you know, the food items stolen, at one time I did work in a fast food place, and they have time limits on their food in fast food places. Like a burger can only be kept for 10 minutes, and then they have to throw it away. So it would be really easy for someone, you know, if they had loaded the bin up with burgers and didn't sell them in that 10 minutes, to pocket some of those burgers instead of throwing them away. Well, the managers do count and keep track of all that product that they didn't sell too, so they would eventually know, you know. But that's one way that stealing takes place in a situation like that in restaurants. And in paragraph 2, it says illegal use of equipment, materials, or supplies. And also down further in the paragraph, using business items for personal use is dishonest. And a lot of people might not realize that. You take a pen home from work, well, that pen was bought by your employer to use at work, for work, right? But if you take it home and you're using it for your own personal things, you're stealing from your employer, okay? So that's a really, that's one that I think isn't too commonly known. You know, remember how banks, they used to do this, okay? They used to have their pens chained to the desk or chained to the counter because people would take them all the time. They would just take off with the pens. Well, now they print their names on the pens and their phone numbers, and it's an advertisement because they know people are just going to take the pens anyway, so they don't try to chain them down anymore. They actually encourage them to take them, which is kind of ironic that they have found that as a mode of advertising. But you know, a lot of people would just walk off with the pen and not even think, well, you know, I can use it. And in paragraph 3, down in paragraph 3, at the top of the end of the first line, it says, by being careless, here's other ways of stealing takes place. By being careless with property belonging to our employer, okay, being careless with it. Respecting the rights of ownership, this is further down in the paragraph. Respecting the rights of ownership includes taking care of and using possessions as instructed to avoid damaging or breaking them, even if they do not belong to us. Tools left lying around or misused and equipment not properly maintained are only some of the ways employees are careless with property. Okay, so things they might not be taking home, but they're not taking care of in the workplace. And you know, everything costs money, and nowadays everything costs a lot more money and is a lot harder to obtain. So, you know, an employee who you can encourage to value the property of the workplace is going to be an asset to the employer. And then in the next paragraph there, paragraph 5, I just highlighted carelessness and negligence result in financial loss and waste of time. You're looking for the items because they didn't get put away or they're broken and you're trying to fix them. So it does take away a lot from the, you know, the productivity of the workplace. Okay, now let's go back to page 61, and we have one more question. And it is, what does a moral attitude in regards to the belongings of others mean? What does a moral attitude in regards to the belongings of others mean? And so this is kind of like the summation of the whole lesson, right? And we find the answer to this also on page 55 in the bottom paragraph. So if you flip back to page 55, it says, a moral attitude in regards to the belongings of others means not damaging, destroying, or vandalizing another's property. And then they explain vandalism here. It means to purposely or willfully destroy anything that belongs to another. And that is something that, as Peaceful Solution teachers, we would teach people that, you know, if that is the mindset, that is negative character, right? To actually on purpose want to destroy others' property or, you know, misuse it, damage it, not care about it, okay? So they really need these lessons to understand the importance of taking care of other people's property. All right, that concludes the review. So then we're going to go back to page 161, or page 61, and we're looking at procedure number 2 here. And procedure number 2, and I numbered these because there's questions here for your students, and a lot of what we do in the Peaceful Solution in these lessons is getting our students to think, okay? Getting them to really think and come up with the correct understanding of how to have a positive character, right? So the first question you want to ask your students is to name some things they would ask for at work, okay? Because we're just talking about asking in general right now in the workplace. And, you know, they're going to have all kinds of answers for you, but some things, you know, anybody want to shout out to me? What's something you might ask for in the workplace? Might not be a tangible thing either. Yes, a raise. Okay, everybody likes to ask that. Well, they might not like to ask for it, but they want to ask for it, right? A raise. And can I go on my break now? Is it time for my break? That's an everyday event, right? The raise one probably isn't an everyday thing, but those are great answers. And also, you know, if they work in some kind of hazardous environment where they need some protective equipment, they might have to ask for that. Can I get gloves or goggles or whatever, you know, is required to do their job that's kept at work, and or necessary supplies. You know, the supplies might not just be a free-for-all. You know, need to go and ask for it. Can I get more pens or staplers, or can I go get some more produce for making salads or whatever, you know, is your job. All right, so number 2, the second question there says, what are some things that are asked of them? Okay, so what are some things that are asked of you, excuse me, as an employee? Okay, so as an employee, what might be something? Anybody? Just a short, quick answer. If you're being interviewed in a job, you know, can I work overtime? That's something you might ask. That's that would be nice sometimes if you can. So that would be a great question, because you can't just keep working and charge your boss. You know, I worked 60 hours this week and they didn't give you permission to do it. That's actually an excellent thing to ask for. Excuse me. You might also ask for directions or instructions on how to do something, right? Especially if you're starting a new job that you've never done before, or even if you've done it before, but you're at a new job and you're familiar with the things you're doing, you're still going to want to ask to know how your employer wants you to do it, right? So you'll ask for instructions or directions. And then there might be some simple tasks you might ask about, or you might be asked to do. Can you take out the trash? Can you sweep the floor? Can you turn off the lights when you leave? Can you lock the door? You know, they might be the last person there. Any of those things, and many more.
but just to get people thinking, what do I ask for and what is asked of me on a daily basis? And we want to explain to our students that the importance of asking in the workplace will be the focus of today's lesson, right? So in this lesson actually isn't just going to go on for one day necessarily. You could do it in a day, but you know, the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program encourages teachers to take their time and make sure that the students really are getting the lesson. And so these lessons can last a week, they can last a month. Whatever time you're incorporating into your workplace, you know, you might only do it once a week, or you might do it daily. So, you know, it's the choice of the employer how to incorporate it, but you can tailor it that way too. And if your employees just don't seem to be getting it on the fast pace, well, then you can go back and start over again, right? So, but this lesson focuses on stressing the importance of asking. And the third question there in procedure number 2 says, ask students what are some reasons why we ask, okay? And the answers here are that we have our needs met, we ask for instructions like I mentioned before, and we're also asking for guidance or clarification. And, you know, I fall into the category of thinking I ask too much sometimes. But, and I know I do. I remember growing up as a child, my parents did teach me, you know, or my mom taught me, you know, well, you got to ask your dad. If I want to do something, I had to ask my dad. So she was always sending me to my dad to ask, can I stay over at my friend's house, or can I have this, or can I do that? She would ask my dad things too. So, you know, she instilled in me that need to ask my authority, right? So I never got to go anywhere or do anything without that permission. So, you know, growing up then, that kind of trickled into the workplace when I started working, that I would just feel the need to ask. You know, and a lot of your students are not going to have that guidance necessarily. Growing up, you know, they might not have that guidance. So this might be the first time, like our first teacher said, where they're getting to understand that asking is something that's really needed. And really, unless your employer says you ask too much, I don't think you can ask too much. Because I've always found it very beneficial. And like I said here at the bottom, it helps guide you and give you clarification so you can do your job to the best of your ability. Okay, so we're going to move on to procedure 3. And it says, choose students to read the introduction found on page 65. Ask students if they have ever considered the importance of asking. How would their lives be affected if they were unable to ask for something they needed, for instructions or for clarification? So if they could never, if they couldn't ask. This is a concept that, might seem crazy to people that, well, of course I can ask, but really if they think they've never really asked much in their life, if you couldn't ask a single question, you would feel like you're on an island all by yourself and you can't function, right? And I wanted to show to you the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program Teacher's Manual. This is grade 5. Okay, and in grade 5, we talk about this in Unit 2, Lesson 1, and that's on page 118, so you can put that in your notes. Grade 5, Unit 2, Lesson 1. And Lesson 1 in Unit 2 is the importance of asking, just like we're talking about tonight. And then if you flip the page to 118, it's really covered in procedures 6 through 9, but 7, I believe, 6 is where it's talking about, I'm going to read it to you. Here it gives this example. Tell students now they realize the important role asking plays in their daily lives. Now that they realize it's important, ask students if they think they can go through a whole day without asking and why or why not. And answers, will vary, but include no, they need to borrow something or use someone else's belongings. No, they can't go a day without asking because they have to ask to make a request known. They need things, right? So tell students to imagine a day in which no one asked for anything. So you just imagine that for a minute. You couldn't ask for anything. No one else could ask for anything. All your employees. Okay, and your coworkers, you'd all go around. How would your day go? Not much would get accomplished, would it? I mean, just imagine that as the boss, you can't say, can you go do such and such for me? No, you can't ask me anything. Oh, that's right, we're not asking today. Or, can I have my break now? You would get hungry, right? And you certainly would not get a raise that day, right? So, but, in grade 5, we're teaching the children to think about that, And that's a pretty quick way to learn that you do need to go through life with asking questions on your mind, asking permission on your mind, because then things will get done. We will be productive, and we will be helpful, and we'll feel great because we're interacting with one another. We wouldn't even really have much to interact with if we couldn't ask questions of one another. All right, so if we turn right here, we're just going to read here, because it says to ask your students this and how would it affect them. And they're going to have all kinds of interesting answers too. And they might include that, in thinking of our technology today, they would not have basic services such as electricity and Wi-Fi because you have to ask to get those things hooked up. You can't have service without asking for it. And they would never have been able to ask their parents for help when they were growing up or their teachers in school. And how awful would that be if we couldn't ask as a young person growing up for any kind of help or any guidance or any, having problems in our lives and not having any way to solve them because all we have is the knowledge in our own brain and there's nobody we could ask. That would be detrimental, right? That would be terrible. So I think by this point, your students are going to understand that, yes, there's a definite need for asking in the workplace and in their lives. So at this point, you're planting a seed to maybe help them start practicing it if it's not something that they're accustomed to. Because some people aren't really accustomed to asking. And so that's something, we have to check on ourselves. Do we ask? Do a self-check. Do I go about my day getting permission for things, or do I just assume I can do it? And there's examples in here about people who assume things, and it didn't go well for them. It made more work for them. Some people could lose their jobs over the choices they made because they just made an assumption instead of seeking some guidance for, their jobs. So we'll get into those a little bit later. Probably next time. Yeah. Let's move on to page 62, and we're at the top there in procedure 4. Ask students why asking is important in the workplace, what we might need to ask permission for, and the benefits of being consistent in asking permission. Allow volunteers to read portions of the importance of asking, what we should ask for, and why should we be consistent in asking. Found on pages 66 and 67, and lead a class discussion. Okay, and a lot of these procedures will say lead a class discussion because you need to have that interaction with your students to make sure that they are grasping the concepts and that they are staying focused on the purpose that you are trying to get them to, understand that, yes, we need asking, and to come into alignment with it and agreement with it by the end of the lesson, hopefully. So let's go over to page 66, okay? 66, and at the top it says, asking means to seek permission. Okay, so that's what the definition of asking, I would say, right there. Asking means to seek permission for something. That's one of the points for asking. And I highlighted the first sentence here under the importance of asking. Asking promotes positive relationships among everyone we interact with on a daily basis. Everyone. There's no exceptions or exclusions. You know, I mean, we talk about children asking their parents or their teachers, or young people asking their employers. Older people, you can ask children. You can ask children things too. Remember the concept of ownership, and you know, I don't just go and take my children's items to use if they're handy to me. I will go and ask them, can I use your book, or can I borrow your highlighters? Whatever I might need at the moment and not finding my own, it would be important for me to practice asking towards them, because it's promoting a positive relationship. If you as the employer just come and take things off your employees' desks and start using them, how's that going to go over? Like, yes, you provided them with those things, but you want to emulate and imitate what you want them to imitate too. So you can set the standard for them as the employer, and that's what we as instructors can really, I think we really need to emphasize that with employers and managers and supervisors, that if you want your employees to ask, you need to be the first one to do it. You need to set that standard by showing them how to ask, especially if it's a really, if it's a rampant problem in your work environment where nobody asks and they don't really understand it, okay? But this is going to promote positive relationships among everyone we interact with on a daily basis. I thought that's a really great point. It says, consider the problems that can arise in the workplace because someone uses or touches another's belongings without asking for permission. Conflicts can flare up like a wildfire and escalate, possibly causing violence, aggression, injury, and even loss of life. And in today's society, that is the truth. It escalates very quickly, or it escalates very quietly, as we did cover that in the last lesson, if you remember, how, you know, violence in the workplace can come from people being, you know, their belongings being trespassed on, or they being trespassed on in different ways. So, you know, these things can just take off if we practice negative character with one another. Now it says, granted, not all conflicts can be avoided by asking first. Okay, so, you know, not everything is going to be solved by this one point, but it can significantly reduce the occurrences by asking permission before touching, handling, or borrowing an item. Okay, so, and I highlighted that. It can significantly reduce the occurrences by asking permission. Okay, because that's the goal. We want to reduce the problems. We want to have a more productive and positive environment to work in and with our employees and employers. And you can ask the students right there, can anyone give examples of conflicts that arise when someone doesn't ask? Okay? I put that as a question there that I would ask my students. Can anyone give examples of conflicts that arise when someone doesn't ask? And that would be a great topic for discussion with your class right there, so you could stop and discuss right there. And you can see how these lessons can take some time to get through. You know, we've only covered 2.5 pages of this lesson so far tonight, but there's a lot to these lessons. And, you know, we're going to stop right there for tonight because we're out of time, and we'll pick up on paragraph 2 on page 66 next time we meet. All right, you've been a great class, and I thank you for your attention, and we'll see you next week.